Bar clash turns ugly. Police harass black twins, not knowing their Navy commanders. Imagine walking into a bar for a quiet night, only to become the target of suspicion, anger, and humiliation because of the color of your skin. Two brothers, both highly decorated Navy SEALs, walked into a crowded bar expecting nothing more than a drink and laughter. But within minutes, they found themselves surrounded by hostile officers who saw them not as heroes, but as threats. What the police didn't know was that the very men they were humiliating were far above them in rank, carrying secrets of valor that could silence a room. This confrontation would turn into a lesson no one inside that bar would ever forget. It was a Friday night, and the bar was alive with chatter, music, and clinking glasses. The twins, Marcus and Malcolm, had just returned from a grueling deployment overseas. Both men carried themselves with a quiet strength, broad-shouldered, disciplined, calm. Years of service had hardened them, but tonight was about release, about being just two brothers enjoying life outside of duty. They chose a small-town bar near the base, the kind of place where regulars knew each other by name. But in this bar, the stares came quickly. Some were curious, some hostile. To most patrons, two strong black men, dressed neatly, speaking confidently, were out of place. At the far end of the counter, two uniformed officers watched with growing unease. Their voices grew louder, laced with mockery, as if daring the twins to respond. Marcus noticed it first, the shift in atmosphere. The once noisy bar now seemed quieter, people's eyes drifting toward them, whispers cutting through the air. They had been through war zones, yet here, in their own country, they felt a different kind of battlefield forming. Neither brother flinched. Their training had taught them control, but their silence was mistaken for defiance. When one officer finally stood, stomping across the floor, his face twisted in anger, the night's turning point had arrived. The officer's finger jabbed inches from Marcus's chest. His voice was sharp, carrying over the crowd, accusing the brothers of loitering and looking suspicious. The absurdity wasn't lost on anyone watching, but fear kept most silent. Malcolm stood firm beside his brother, arms crossed, his calm demeanor fueling the officer's fury. To the police, their silence was arrogance. To the crowd, it was quiet dignity. The second officer joined in, shoving his way forward, his tone harsher, barking orders, demanding identification. The brothers didn't move. Years of discipline told them restraint was more powerful than reaction. They knew too well how quickly things could escalate when uniformed authority felt challenged. But every second of silence poured gasoline on the fire. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some whispered about the unfairness, others smirked with satisfaction. Racism often hides in shadows, but here it was lit clearly under the bar's warm lights. The officers grew louder, their insults sharper. Words like troublemakers and outsiders cut through the air. It was humiliation masked as law enforcement. The bar, once filled with laughter, now felt like a courtroom with no defense. Marcus clenched his jaw. Memories of serving overseas filled his mind, risking his life for a flag that still allowed moments like this. He had seen enemies with more respect than the men in front of him now. One officer pushed forward, daring Marcus to react. The crowd held its breath, expecting fists to fly. But instead, Marcus calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, not in anger, but in patience. Inside was his military ID, but he didn't hand it over. He waited. He knew timing was everything. The crowd leaned in, the tension almost unbearable. Finally, Marcus placed his ID on the counter. The officer snatched it, glancing down with smugness until his eyes widened. Silence swept across his face. His jaw tightened as he read the rank. Captain Marcus Reed. The bar went silent. Malcolm slowly pulled out his own ID, setting it beside his brother's. The second officer picked it up, expecting something ordinary, until the word "Commander" glared back at him. The room froze. The same men they had ridiculed, insulted and treated like criminals, were not only military men, they were leaders. decorated heroes, Navy SEALs who commanded respect at the highest levels. The weight of their mistake fell heavily. The officers, once loud and confident, now struggled for words. Their faces turned pale, their voices caught. Around them, whispers spread like wildfire. "Captains! Commanders!" Someone muttered from the crowd. The twins didn't boast. They didn't raise their voices. They simply stood in silence, the truth louder than any defense they could have given. And in that silence, the bar shifted. People who had once watched passively now looked at the officers with judgment, with anger. The power dynamic flipped in an instant. The officers fumbled with apologies, but none could erase the sting of their actions. The brothers picked up their IDs, slid them back into their wallets, and turned to leave. They didn't need to stay. Their dignity had spoken louder than the officers' rage ever could. The crowd parted silently, making way for them. Some lowered their heads in shame, others in newfound respect. The officers stood frozen, their authority shattered by the truth they had tried to bury under prejudice. That night became legend in the town. Not because of a fight, but because of a revelation. The story spread: two black men, humiliated by those sworn to protect, revealed to be protectors of the nation themselves. It was a mirror held up to society, reflecting the uncomfortable truth of racism, even in the presence of greatness. The brothers never sought recognition. For them, it wasn't about proving themselves. It was about holding their ground with dignity, about refusing to let prejudice drag them into anger. But the question lingered long after they left. How many others, without ranks, without titles, face the same humiliation every day? How many voices go unheard, their worth unseen, because of the color of their skin? The bar learned that night that respect shouldn't come from a uniform or a badge. It should come from humanity. And for those who witnessed it, the lesson was unforgettable.